15555 Carey commented on our video regarding Mark Biltz and his blood moon theory with some important information about Biltz that I think is worth sharing here. Mark Biltz has dedicated a significant portion of his ministry to connecting Christianity back to its Jewish roots. Biltz has shown thousands how understanding Jewish teachings, customs, and rites can shed incredible light on Christian theology and practice. This work is important, and Biltz is not alone in it. The historical Jesus movement, which has had historians and theologians from a myriad of theological perspectives, seeks to explore Jesus in his cultural context. There truly has been some great work done connecting Jesus and Christianity to their respective Jewish roots. This just leaves one huge question. Christianity, it is a religion with a first-century Palestinian Jewish Messiah. So how on earth did Christianity become so disconnected from its Jewish roots? Let's dive in. Welcome, explorers, and let me thank 15555 Carey for your comment. It allows me to dive into two very important points. First, just because I may disagree with Mark Biltz over his theory of the blood moons does not mean that I believe everything Biltz teaches is unsound. I do not believe that lunar eclipses as prophetic devices holds weight, but I can believe that and at the same time believe other aspects of Biltz's teachings are important. As stated, Biltz has done a great deal of work connecting Jesus and Christianity to its Jewish roots. And I absolutely believe an understanding of the Old Testament and Jewish history can greatly help you to understand Jesus and the New Testament. My professor, Dr. Platt, called the New Testament the Bible's appendix, and I have continued that sentiment in my own ministry, striving to use the Old Testament to shed light on the New. I do not believe that you can fully understand the New Covenant under Christ without understanding the Old Covenants under Noah, Abraham, Moses, and David. But that's another video. The second important point is that every conversation opens the door to a fascinating bit of church history, and 15555 Carey's comment is no exception. This comment again speaks of Biltz's work of connecting Christianity to its Jewish roots. But again, with a first-century Palestinian Jewish Messiah, how in the world could Christianity become disconnected from its Jewish roots and the Jewishness of its own Messiah? The story is fascinating. It begins in the late 1st and early 2nd century. Between 66 CE and 136 CE, there are 3 military conflicts between the Jews and the Romans in an effort by the Jews to thwart Roman control. These conflicts together are known as the Jewish-Roman Wars. You can even see the desire for these rebellions simmering in the New Testament. There is the very loaded question to Jesus of, should we pay taxes to Caesar? And also, one of Jesus' disciples was Simon the Zealot. The Zealots were a Jewish group who wanted to end Roman occupation and control of Israel. But these 3 conflicts have various names but are popularly known as, first, the First Jewish and Roman War from 66 to 73 CE when the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed. The second is the Ketos War from 115 to 117 CE. And very importantly for this topic is the third conflict known as the Kokhba Revolt from 132 to 136 CE. In the Kokhba Revolt, there were heavy losses on both sides, but the Jews were soundly defeated. Histories speak of the Jews being annihilated and their population in Judea being decimated. But also the Romans suffered heavy casualties as well. Being the third such revolt in less than a century, the Romans had enough of the Jews and they dropped the hammer hard upon the Jews in retribution for the Kokhba Revolt. Emperor Hadrian levied massive punitive measures in an attempt to destroy the Jewish faith and identity. These measures lasted until his death. Hadrian outlawed the Torah, which most Christians would understand as the Old Testament. He outlawed the Jewish calendar. He executed Jewish theologians and burned Jewish writings. All of this was an effort to destroy Judaism. But Hadrian went further. He wanted to destroy their very identity. He renamed the region of Judea to Syria-Palestina. He forbid many associations with Jews and limited where and when Jews could travel to certain areas. It was a massive punitive measure, and it was in this political landscape of massive retribution being levied against the Jewish peoples across Rome that Christian apologists of the early 2nd century decided to show Rome, we are not Jewish. Christianity is not Jewish. And they very consciously and intentionally disconnected Christianity from its Jewish roots in an effort to not be placed into the same situation as the Jews and Judaism under these harsh penalties. Several Christian theologians took part, but we will briefly examine one, and that is Justin Martyr. And Martyr is not his last name, it is a title of how he died. He was killed or martyred for his beliefs, so his arguments here do not spare him from his punishment from Rome. But Justin argues that Christianity is not Judaism. In his work, First Apology, which was addressed to Empress Antoninus Pius, the emperor who followed Hadrian, he lays the foundation for Christianity not being Judaism. In chapter 47, Justin states that the destruction of Judea during the Bar Kokhba revolt was foretold by prophecy. It was God's plan that the Romans destroyed that place. In chapter 49, he states that the Jews rejected Jesus as the Messiah and treated him shamefully. But it was the non-Jewish Gentiles who were filled with joy and cast away their idols for Jesus. And in chapter 53, Jesus being a Messiah for the Gentiles was foretold in prophecy. And the Gentiles may not be circumcised in the flesh like the Jews, but it is the Gentiles who are circumcised in the heart, while the Jews have uncircumcised hearts. That's a big-time theology burn. And a couple of other notes from First Apology, Justin connects Plato, beloved by the Romans, to Jesus and the cross. And he states that Christians worship on Sunday, not Saturday like those Jews. But First Apology is tame compared to Justin's work, Dialogue with Trypho. Trypho is presented as a Jew, and this book is Justin's response to a Jewish Trypho and Trypho's arguments. In Dialogue with Trypho, Justin continues with similar teachings. The Jews do not understand their own prophecies. The Jewish teaching on salvation and forgiveness do not work. Christianity has true forgiveness through Christ. The Jews rejected their own Messiah. But in Dialogue with Trypho, he goes much, much farther. Justin argues that most Jewish rituals were instituted because of their sins, such as Sabbaths and sacrifices, and they do nothing to bring righteousness today. There is no salvation apart from Jesus and belief in him. And also, Justin states that the Holy Spirit is now being poured out upon Christians and not the Jews. And finally, his last idea persists in many Christian circles today. Justin writes in Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 82, "For the prophetical gifts remain with us Christians even to the present time, and hence you ought to understand that the gifts formerly among your nation, the Jews, has been transferred to us Christians." End quote. And this idea of the people of God's blessings, such as the prophetical gifts, has been transferred to Christians or the church, and they have been removed from the Jews, has been a continual belief in some Christian circles. The idea that Christians and not the Jews are the people of God post-Christ is a commonly held belief. And this idea dates back to Justin and other Christian theologians that were attempting to distance Christianity from the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Jews, and the punishments the Jews suffered. And this idea is as much politically motivated as it is biblically motivated. And Mark Biltz and the Historical Jesus Movement and many other pastors and theologians have done great work reconnecting Christianity to its Jewish roots, lost as a result of the Bar Kokhba revolt and the subsequent distancing by early Christian theologians. I wonder if my family de-Frenched the pronunciation of our last name because we were the bad guys during the French Revolution. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and my bibliography is in the description below. Be blessed.